Well, time flies, I have to say, and thank you very much for the wonderful pitches we have right now. We are halfway of the session, and now I would like to invite all the panelists. Please join me on the stage. Same as Ronan Wisdom, who is going to lead this panel discussion of mHealth predictions. Please, let's give a super big round of applauses. Thank you.
For joining us today at our mHealth Predictions panel. My name is Ronan Wisdom. I work with Accenture, and I've worked at the intersection of technology and healthcare for just about 25 years now. And the last 10 years have seen tremendous change for digital actually impacting patients and patient outcomes. And I can't really imagine that we can foresee everything that the next 10 years is going to bring, but our panel are going to make some predictions for you. So with that, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves to you, and then we'll start our discussion. Sajid.
So I'm Sajid Rahman, part of Telenor Health. We are building a health business, a digital health business, which is serving from health content to doctor consultations, to health insurance to almost 5 million people in the last 1 year.
Thank you. Oksana.
Hello, I'm Oksana Pyzik, and I'm a lecturer and researcher at the UCL School of Pharmacy, and I'm also a qualified pharmacist.
Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter Anamus. I'm into health scoring, so I aggregate very large amount of data around your health, and we are a business-to-business provider, and our health score is globally patented and licensed to large life and health insurance operators, and then we integrate artificial intelligence on top of that.
Thank you, Peter. Asher.
Hello, everyone. I'm Asher Hassan with a sore throat, so apologies. I'm the founder of a company called Doctors, which is a digital health platform that basically matches the underutilized capacity of female doctors who otherwise would be excluded from the health workforce to the unmet health needs of underserved communities, using trusted intermediaries such as frontline health workers who we augment with remote diagnostic instruments. Happy to tell you more about that later.
Great, thank you, Asher. Okay, so let's take a minute and look at our first prediction, and it's about robotic surgeons. This actually comes from Asher. So the prediction is that remote robotic-assisted surgeries will become commonplace with initial applications in military. Now, of course, these are happening now, but the prediction is that they will become commonplace. Asher, fascinating. Tell us more.
Sure. The last sentence, by the way, came directly from Donald Trump. So just in terms of robotics, for those of you who are not familiar with the Da Vinci surgical system, I'll give you a very brief overview. So the Da Vinci surgical system is essentially a robot with 4 arms that's deployed widely across the world now, available in operating rooms, operating theaters, in which surgeons who are typically within the room or close to the operating room are able to use those robotic arms and instruments connected to those robotic arms to do very precise, minimally invasive surgery. The advantage of that, of course, is quicker recovery times, minimal blood loss, etc. And so definitely an advance or a leap in terms of surgical technique. Now, what I'm alluding to 10 years from now is actually a miniaturization and a mobilization of Da Vinci. So imagine that you have these miniature Da Vincis which are deployed in the field, which have the capability using artificial intelligence to identify soldiers or combatants or non-combatants who have injuries. And they're able to actually use AI to identify and then to intervene, again, using the assistance of surgeons. And so over time, what we'll see is this paradigm will actually flip from robotic-assisted surgery to humans assisting robots in surgery.
Wonderful. And do you think this type of technology will ever replace surgeons, humans in healthcare?
I think the human touch is essential in medicine, and so I don't see it completely replacing. I do see maybe 90% of a surgeon's time being or reassigned or reallocated, if you will, to robotics, and so there'll be more opportunity for surgeons to do more cases, more interactions, more human interaction. Most surgeons are actually quite renowned for not being very good at human interaction. I'm one of those. And my significant other tells me that all the time. And essentially, though, I see that more and more, they will be able to practice more compassionate care by enabling robots to take care of a lot of the technical stuff.
Very good. And is there a steep learning curve with this type of technology? And is that a challenge?
No, I think that as robotics improves, as artificial intelligence advances, I think that surgeons typically are adept and they'll learn quicker. The rate at which learning is occurring is accelerating. And that is, again, technology enabled. So I don't see it being a challenge.
Peter, do you think learning and education generally for the adoption of mHealth and where we hope it will go in 10 years, do you think this is something that we need to be focused on?
I think we have right now a shift in generations. So I lately spoke at the American Medical Association, which has 280,000 members. And it's very clear right now that you have one generation who is maybe a little bit reluctant, and then you have a generation which is digital. I would, however, also say that you have 70-year-old or 65-year-old doctors who are super excited about digital. So I don't believe it's an age issue. I believe it's more of a cultural issue, and that people are open-minded towards digitalization.
Okay, so we're going to get some audience participation. I'm interested to know, if you had the choice to have robotic-assisted surgery versus a wholly human surgery, how many of you would choose the robotic-assisted approach? Okay, so yeah, maybe 30%. Maybe so we got some distance to go on that one. Okay, all right, very good. We'll move on to our next prediction. And this comes from Oksana, and it's about intelligent implants. That medication will be provided in implantable form and delivered automatically based on real-world data, for example, in emergency situations. Oksana, can you expand on that?
Sure, I'm really excited about this particular idea, particularly because of the impact that it can have on life-saving situations, its potential to change in acute emergencies. And really, if we look at what the numbers say, we have the #1 killer worldwide is cardiovascular disease. And if we break that down even further, and let's look at a specific condition. So let's take stroke, for instance. Annually, about 15 million people worldwide will suffer a stroke. So an occlusion in the vessel that then starves the brain of oxygen. And this is a serious emergency. Of that 15 million people, 10 million will either die or suffer a severe disability. These are terrible numbers. This is not good news. And the reason that it's not good news is it's a hyper-acute, time-sensitive window. Okay, matter of minutes makes a difference in terms of function. If we take heart attack, similar problems with occlusion and, again, lack of oxygen, we see that for every minute that passes, 10% of bodily function is lost. So if we can imagine an intelligent implant that can take that real-world information from a physiological perspective, so what's happening inside your body in that moment of the stroke, in that moment of a heart attack, in these emergency situations that are absolutely time-dependent. We know that you'll have a spike in blood pressure. C-reactive protein will be released through these inflammation pathways. There's a series of biomarkers that a sensor could read. If that was then linked to an implant, a drug reservoir, which had a single dose of treatment. So currently under guidelines, aspirin, 300 milligrams, as well as glyceryl trinitrate, which is a drug that expands the vessels, vasodilator. If we could get that instantly, what a difference that would make.
Great. And what do you think are the biggest obstacles for adoption of something like this? Is it the technology? Is it regulatory? Is it security and privacy concerns?
Well, I think that if you look what we have, the technology we have available in palliative care, we already have a subcutaneous delivery of morphine via pump that is patient administered. Insulin pumps are well on their way. What will be the big challenge is in terms of the personal or individual variation that can occur on a physiological level. So if we look at the neuroendocrine stress response, that getting that information right via the sensor will be crucial. So I do think that the technological challenge will be the biggest. Given how many people do suffer from these types of conditions, I don't see a big resistance to uptake, personally. I mean, the rest of my panelists may disagree. Alteplase is the drug that's used for stroke. And according to American statistics, only 20 to 30% of people get it within that crucial 3-hour window. Again, these are terrible numbers. So I think that if we can get the technology right, that this could be a big improvement for health.
Sure. And Asher, what kind of complications or challenges do you see for that kind of mHealth technology being adopted within the next 10 years?
So in terms of the delivery, the use of particles or the use of delivery agents, is that the question? Well, obviously, safety is always going to be a concern, and I think, especially from a regulator perspective, their primary concern is going to remain patient safety. And so, one of the fears or apprehensions is that regulators may slow down, decelerate the rate at which some of these studies are progressing from animal studies into human clinical studies and ultimately into commercialization. That's probably the one concern, the major concern I would have is from a safety perspective. A lot of this technology has not been fully flushed out, experimented in humans at scale. It's all been done mostly in labs. And so obviously, whenever you are doing something in a lab and then transferring it to full commercial scale, there's always this chance that there will be some unknown or something that you hadn't predicted would happen. A safety concern, an adverse effect that could potentially shut down the program. I think that is something that is a risk that we all understand and that we're all willing to take, because we understand that in order to make advances in this type of area, we have to take those types of risks.
Okay, and Sajid, one of the areas you work in is developing markets. And so these type of technologies sound great for well-developed infrastructures in well-developed markets where everybody has access to infrastructure and services. Do you think this type of technology can be useful in emerging markets where communities have less access?
I think so. I think one of the, one of the hypotheses of all the predictions is that, this will leapfrog. So the divide of economics and the divide of countries or geography will be leapfrogged by the advancement of technology and availability of the technology at a mass scale. So yeah, I mean, I think it's not a question of once we crack the scientific and technological aspects of it, I think doing it in a mass scale will not be a challenge.
Okay. All right, our next prediction, and this comes from Peter, and it's around personal health scoring. And Peter's prediction is that health scoring will be part of our daily life, just like a credit score is in today's world. Peter, would you expand, please?
Yeah, the largest industry in the world is obviously healthcare. We spent $7.8 trillion on healthcare last year, and we never had a balance sheet. And I think what is the fatal part of it is, number one, every health insurance operator or government, before the year starts, they have already spent 65% of their budgets on NCDs, meaning chronic diseases. So as we move forward, the system will obviously collapse. In my view, it will go bankrupt. So the latest research from large research organizations is that healthcare will continuously increase in cost about 4.7% every year over the next 10 years. So basically, we believe that just like you have a credit score, that you will have a health score. You heard the gentleman from Nokia talking about knowledge earlier today. So Da Vinci originally defined health 530 years ago. You all remember the drawing with the arms and the legs. And he said, you consist of your body, your mind, and your life. And based on that, we aggregate and score 100 data points. So let me try to put this together. We will have 5 million data mobile phones worldwide, 5 billion, sorry, by 2025. We will have, according to Cisco, 10 billion biosensors by 2025. So basically, you will have a health score. This health score will be enhanced by artificial intelligence, just like you have a car navigation system, so that it will help you navigate for better health. And at the end of the day, it would be what we call something for something society. So the solidarity principle, of course, will stay, but there would be a point-based system for people who try to live better that they get points from their insurance companies or from their employers. So to kind of wrap it up, health scoring will become a completely natural part of your life. It will be aggregated from multiple biosensors. It could be the steering wheel in your car that gives you your blood pressure. It could be the body weight of your sofa. You have all different kind of things. I'm sure you know that Google is working on your eyesight. So all these signals will have to be put into something meaningful.
Very good. And do you see this impacting the cost associated with healthcare? My health score might impact the cost or availability of health services to me.
That's a very good question. One of the very large studies that was done on inefficiency in the insurance industry was done by McKinsey, and they say you can take out 25 to 30% of every single life and health insurance operator worldwide. So yes, you can take out an enormous amount of cost.
Okay, and Oksana, motivation for patients and consumers to use this type of technology is something we all talk about, engagement and motivation. If this becomes a reality, we really must be engaged. How do you think patients will be engaged by this type of technology?
So I think when you look at positive results in health psychology, a little bit of an improvement can set a pattern of behavior that leads to bigger change. And really, the earlier idea about implant devices, really the underlying problem, of course, is the non-communicable diseases. And if we are able to use these health scores in a way as a motivational tool so that already the risk is lower. We have epidemic obesity in both developing and non-developed countries. So I think that from the psychological perspective, this could be powerful. But I am worried about some unintended ethical problems that could arise from this, and particularly when we look at genetics and these predispositions. Is it really fair to say that if you're born with something like a congenital heart disease, that your point system would already be lower to begin with, and what that really means in people who have lower resources in countries where healthcare is expensive. So there is a bit of a question around ethics, I think.
Okay, great. And I wanted to ask the audience, you're up. How many people are tracking their activity and health via a wearable? Now, that's surprisingly low. This is Mobile World Congress. We should have had more hands than that. Okay, all right. Well, we'll continue on with the next prediction. Okay, my data marketplace. This is Sahid's, and it's that people will collect their own health data and share it for an incentive, earning money just by being alive. Well, that sounds good to me. Please expand.
So, it's often said that we are living in one of the best times in world history. And I think it's not because there had been significant scientific development, obviously, but I think what's happening is there are a lot of interdisciplinary forces coming together. And this particular prediction is sort of three forces coming together. One is first, as Peter was mentioned, we have billions of data tracked every day. So we are now collecting data from different points every day on individual level. Second is we are now trying to make sense of the data. The machine learning is becoming very strong. The cost of chip and the processing power is becoming very big. I saw a tweet that the iPhone X, apparently if you wanted to use 1960s technology, that would require the whole power of the whole world to produce one iPhone X. So that's the development that has happened. The third thing is we are becoming more conscious of our data. If health is the most important thing that we have, shouldn't we control the data we have? So with these three forces coming together, the prediction is that in future, we will collect the data, we'll measure the data, and we'll share the data to all the people, all the research agencies, all the big corporations who wants to use this data. And we'll basically get rewarded for that. Because, as we all know, most of the future development will be based on how this data is used.
Great. And I was going to ask, who do you think would pay? You mentioned some of the people there. I suppose many stakeholders in the healthcare ecosystem would want access to that kind of data. But how do you think this might impact clinical research if we have all of this data readily available when we know that recruiting patients for trials is such a challenging task?
I think it depends, on where the data is needed. For example, in most of the cases, the data would be available. If you're talking about, let's say, Let's say we talked about sensors, and we're talking about collecting individual data at, without probably interfering much. We can, nowadays, we can be using sensor, collect the oxygen or blood level oxygen data. We can collect the sugar data. So the question is that, can we share this data with other researchers and use that? On a clinical trial level, I think when you're talking about a very serious level, patient cases, those obviously, again, that's a question of pool of those data and using it. So I don't see a clinical trial becoming question because of the lack of availability of this data.
Okay. All right. And again, for the audience, now my last question as to how many of you were tracking your health, not very many put up their hands. So imagine all of you were. How many of you would share your personal health data for an incentive? Okay, so about the same number, quite a low number. We'll have to come back and see if that actually turns out to be a reality. Okay, our next prediction is around smart therapies, the convergence of predictive analytics and personalized medicine to predict efficacy and safety of a therapy will fundamentally disrupt the industry. Asher, this is yours. Can you expand for us?
Sure. Just before I do that, though, I do want to make a comment about the previous.
Sure.
Because I think it depends on how you frame incentives. So an incentive, for example, which is that you can help increase or enable a paraplegic to be able to walk using an exoskeleton from data that you share, is something that a lot of people would be willing to do. So it depends on how you frame the incentive. If it's framed as a financial incentive that we will pay you, then probably the response will be poorer. But if the incentive is that you can be part of a peer support group that can actually really make a difference in someone's life, then I think that a lot more, the response, the question that you posed would get a much more positive response. That's just my thinking around that. Coming back to smart therapies, so Oksana kind of alluded to this already, which is that you're now beginning to see the emergence of therapies which are targeted, which use nanoparticles. So just to give you a couple of examples, we are now able to, and there's been research on this, we are now able to deliver vectors such as viruses and bacteria into tumors, which are typically oxygen-depleted environments, bacteria that are what are referred to as magneto or hypoxotactic, meaning that they seek oxygen-depleted and can be guided by magnetic fields. I know it sounds very sci-fi, but those type of agents are typically embedded or loaded with drug particles, nanoparticles of a specific agent. And so that's the delivery side of it. On the data side of it, on the big data side of it, you now have the capacity to see what types of tumors at an individual personal level, what the receptor, what the tumor signals of this individual are, what their genotype is, and how you might be able to map the two, so that depending on what type of tumor markers that individual has, you are able to then deliver a specific type of delivery agent to a specific type of tumor. So you're beginning to see this convergence of big data and targeted therapies, and I think that we've just seen the beginning of this.
Yeah. So if we have an algorithm that can predict for me the safety and efficacy of a drug, who's likely to use that information? Is it the provider that's prescribing? Is it the life sciences manufacturer that's creating? Or might it even be used by the patient deciding between different therapeutic routes?
I think it could be three stakeholders. It could be the patient as an informed health seeker. It could be the provider. But I actually also think it can be ethical drug companies, the ones that understand that they want their drugs to be used appropriately, especially if they're oncology therapies. They don't want toxicity to occur in patients unnecessarily. And here I'm referring to the ethical ones. So I think that even pharmaceutical companies will want to promote this as a technology and share this information widely with both providers as well as with consumers.
Thank you. And Peter, a lot of your career has been around the value of data. So it really seems like everything that we're talking about is underpinned by data and data that we collect in new and different ways. Is it really going to be so much more important in 10 years than it is now, the value of data to healthcare?
I think most people underestimate the predictiveness of big data, and I mean it in a positive sense. And let me just take one step back. We talked about the ethical. Number one, we don't license any data, we don't sell any data. The data is owned by the private individual. And I'm a big believer in GDPR and the whole privacy discussion. But on the importance of the data, we can today, over an ROC curve, meaning data prediction, we can by 0.93 predict cancer, diabetes 2, etc. And we have already scored over 300 million man-years of clinical data. So number one, if somebody has cancer, I can promise you 99% they would share with anyone just to survive. So the luxury, I'm not going to share with other people that I have high blood pressure and I extra provoke, and you know that, is a little bit stupid because it can actually save your life. So going forward, if somebody has cancer, they would share anything. If somebody has high blood pressure, most people can already see it just by the color of your face or your behavior or whatever. So I think there is a social change, and number one, and number two, as there will become more and more evidence of people's lives saved, better lives, healthier lives, etc. If we just think about the soap that saved 10 years of our life, then came antibiotics, that gave us another 10 years of our life. I personally believe digital health will give us between 10 to 20 years of quality life lived. And that is significant progress in healthcare.
It really will be. Okay, and so we're going to close our panel on that really optimistic note for digital health in healthcare. I'm going to ask Diana to come back and give us some closing comments. And while she's coming to the stage, please put your hands together for the panelists for today's discussion.
Well, wow, I just can say what a great panel. Thank you so much for that. Right now, we just